So these are the kind of things you're going to learn from Eunice today. And building on all that we did yesterday, you're going to find that Eunice is pretty practical in the things she'll be sharing. So if you have questions, skip the questions, write them down, let us know, pay attention, and let's just put our hands together as we welcome Madam Eunice Babatunde. Where are the claps? Where are the emojis? Oh my God. Eunice, don't unmute your mic. They must react. Exactly. Okay, so that's like 4%. I need like 100%.
Thank you for clapping for me.
All right. Eunice, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. I know that most people say that all the time, but it is what it is. Sharing the screen. Minimize this one. Okay, full screen. Great. So I'm not going to ask if you can see my screen because I know that you can. And just like Martin said, my name is Eunice Babatunde, and I hope that the few things I'm going to share with you would be valuable to you and would be worth your while. So briefly and without taking much of your time, I'm going to talk today about applying to US MSc and PhD programs, particularly for, well, not exactly 2025, 2026, because we're almost at the end of the year, but that's where we are. So the goal is to provide you as international students with more or less best practices, a little bit of advice, and then documents that you need to more or less prepare to be able to submit competitive applications for your US graduate programs. And then I also talk a lot about like visa policies and some updates, even just to immigration in general, because a lot has changed in the past few months. So at a glance, what are some things that you need to have in your more or less package for your application? The first thing will be academic records, your personal statements, also a professional profile, recommendation letters. You need to talk about research and your writing. And then there are also standardized tests and some language tests that you need to take, as well as money. Money is important. So breaking this down, a comprehensive application basically shows your academic rigor and your research potential. I know that a lot of people come to the US and they're like, oh, I'm not sure I want to do research. Maybe I just want to do like a master's. There are also pathways for that. But it's important to present yourself more or less in the best light and in a wholesome manner, in the sense that don't leave anything out in your application. If you've volunteered before, don't leave it out. If you've worked at a company, don't leave it out. All of those things could be essential to the success of your application. So speaking about academic records, if you don't have a transcript now, official transcript from your school, I would advise that you go and start working towards it. Some schools will say, oh, we can't give you the transcript directly, we can only send it to the school that you're applying to. Whatever the case is, make sure that you're well informed. How much does a transcript process cost? How long does it take to get delivered to the school that I would impute on the form? And then are there any special requirements? Do I need to have paid 100% of my school fees? Do I need to be completely, done with my program before I can get an official transcript? Make sure you find out what the requirements are from your current school or your previous school in terms of transcripts, because some schools will say, oh, well, since you're applying to us, we're able to take an unofficial transcript now, but we still want you to send an official transcript to us once your application process is complete or once you've been admitted, to be sure that you didn't fake any of your, of your records, or to be sure that your records are accurate. And then if you come from a country where English is not the first language, you might need to translate your transcripts to English. And those are some things that you need to find out. And then some people also do WES evaluations to say, okay, take your GPA from a 5-point scale to a 4-point scale and all of those things. So you need to find out what is the requirement for the school that I'm coming from and what are the requirements for the school that I want to go to. So like I mentioned, international grading systems would vary. Some schools care more than others. Some schools will say, okay, we're only going to take the last 60 hours on your transcript and consider that as your grade, right? So the next thing I would mention or I'll speak about are personal statements. The next thing I'll speak about are personal statements. It's important for you to write a compelling statement of purpose. And I know the last time we did this, I showed a couple of examples, but I'm not going to do that today just because of time. But it's very important for you to tell your story. I think that one thing that I always mention, even when I'm talking to people about, oh, get this scholarship, that scholarship, I always tell them write your story in a way that is relatable. Yes, because you're submitting your application to a body of professionals in your field, you want to ensure that you're using the right jargon in the sense that, let me give an example. You know how we see so many people say, oh, if there's a post on LinkedIn, somebody's going to write it in such an elaborate way, whereas what they just meant to say was, I changed the bulb or I fixed a screw, right? So you want to be able to use the right professional language for your field to show that you have some level of growth compared to when you were just in like high school or secondary school and you didn't really know too much about, you know, the terms that were used in the field. So you want to write that, but you also want to be able to tell a story where you can say, okay, this is the global impact of my work, and this is how I narrow it down to my own research and my research experiences or my job experiences in the past. So if you have, for example, using my own case as a water quality engineer, I'm definitely going to start my statement telling them about the effect of clean water on people or societies or even my locality where I come from. And then I'm going to narrow it down to the jobs that I've done, the classes I took, and how all of these tie together to tell a wholesome story of my interest and why I would like to pursue further what's it called, education in the field, and what I even intend to contribute not only to the department, but how do I want to use my degree after I'm done with it. Those are things that they would like to see in your personal statement or your statement of purpose. So also there's a slight difference between statement of purpose and personal statement. And I think the name already implies it. A statement of purpose says, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. A personal statement would show more of who you are and your motivations, your goals. It talks more about yourself, but in the long run, you still want to highlight why you're doing what you are doing, right? And then talk about your goals, talk about your motivations. And one thing I know is people like to read applications from people that are forward thinking, people that have foresight. So be very, very application driven also when you're talking about your purpose, your goals, your motivation. Also for a professional profile, you would very, very likely be asked to submit either an academic CV or a resume, depending on, how much you've done. But it typically is around 2 pages. So even if you have written 500 publications before applying for a PhD or an MSc, it's still important for you to make it concise, to make your document concise, because nobody's going to read your 50 pages. You're not applying to be a professor, you're applying to be a student, right? So make your documents comprehensive, but make sure that they touch, a lot of things. So this is why it's helpful to use bullet points, highlight relevant experiences. So for example, if you are applying to be an engineer and then there was a time where you maybe sold something in a store, the question is that experience relevant for your application? If it's relevant in the sense that you were able to provide some, my battery's low, excuse me.
So you have joined the gang that used to not charge their laptop, Eunice.
I'm sorry. So if you find out that, oh, your sales experience is relevant to, your engineering degree, in the sense that maybe, for example, you sold parts that are used in engineering applications. You sold valves, you sold tubing, you sold what else could you sell? Treatment materials for water, or whatever the case is, right? Or you learned a lot about construction materials by selling it, and you can tie that to your degree, then yeah, that's a relevant experience. But you also need to write it in a way that they can see, okay, this is important for this person's knowledge building and their journey. So write relevant things in your CV. Don't go and write, oh, I was helping my mother to sell fish, and then after selling fish, we made money. That's not important in that light, or depending on, the program that you're applying for. If you feel that, oh, your program is something relating to sales or business, maybe you're applying for an MBA, for example, and you have sales experience from working in your mother's store, that's a perfect, what's it called now? That's a perfect experience to list on your resume. So it's important to tie things together, because this is even going to be important for you in your visa interviews, your interview with the professors and with the faculty. It's important for you to have that mindset and that thinking from the beginning. How is it that the things that I've done before contribute to where I'm going to be? Also, recommendation letters. You need strong recommendation letters. You need your people from, like, what? How do I put it now? Your professors, maybe people you've worked with before, your faculty, you need them to recommend you. And um, you would need typically from two to three, most times three. I don't think I've seen anywhere that would ask you to submit four recommendation letters, but you know, it's helpful to have people that can speak well of you. So don't ask someone that does not like you to write a recommendation letter for you. Most times when they submit recommendation letters, you send them a link, or rather you write their emails in a form, and then they get sent a link on what to do, what they would like to hear about the student, and all those kind of things. So imagine if you have somebody that kept telling, oh, you, this boy, you're a very naughty student, I don't like you, but and you can just tell that this person does not think highly of you, or they don't think well of you. Having that kind of person write a recommendation letter for you may not do you any good. So it's important for you to also think about it. What is my, work experience or my relationship with this person before you ask them to write recommendation letters for you? These people should also be people that know your work very well. So don't go say, oh, I see this person passing and I say good morning every time. And because of that, they're going to write a recommendation letter for you. They might say, oh, yeah, you're a good student, da, da, da. But they cannot speak to your work. They cannot say, okay, this is what this person has done before. This is what makes it important. So those are some things that you need to think about when you're picking recommenders. In terms of research and writing, if you're going to apply for a PhD, it's most likely advisable to have some research experience, in the sense that maybe you should have publications, right? Even if it's just one, even if it's something that you've done before. And then I feel like your thesis from your undergraduate degree, your thesis, even if you had done a master's prior to that, are also things that you can showcase as your previous research work, right? So don't say, oh, because my thesis is not in a very fancy journal, then it's not useful. That's not true. You've done some critical thinking, you've done some analysis, some data review, and all of those things. And those things count towards, showcasing your skills and how much you're able to contribute even to the team that you're willing to, or you're trying to join. And some places or some schools and programs will ask you to write a research proposal. So those are some things that you can expect and you can start thinking about. Also, based on this, or rather, depending on the school, you might be required to write language tests, standardized tests, and also depending on the country that you're from, right? So GRE is also optional in some cases, but a lot of schools, or some schools, will still ask you to submit GRE, and they say no, what's it called now? No exemptions. So it's important for you to start your search early and say, if I'm applying to 5 schools, what are the requirements, not just from the school, but even from the department? A lot of departments have different things that they want because, well, maybe one professor here thinks GRE is important and the other one thinks GRE is not as important. So it's important for you to see what the requirements are for the department you're applying to, not just the school, right? And then in some cases, they have like minimum scores that would give you a better chance. So, for example, a school can tell you, oh, your GRE, you must have 300 minimum. Another school will tell you, oh, if you give us 285, we're good. So, look at all of those requirements and then um, prepare in advance for them. The GRE exam is a computer-based test, even the TOEFL or IELTS. They are computer-based exams, and I think they also offer paper option, but I don't think people do that anymore. But if you write the computer-based test, you need to know that these are timed tests. These are things that you need to prepare, months in advance for. So minimum 2 months, 1 month, you should already start preparing for your exam. And then the exam that you're going to write in 2 months, you need to already have registered for it way ahead of the day that you take it because seats fill up, they have limited availability. You need to pick a center that's close to you and things like that, and then plan logistics of how to get there if it's not really close to your location. So all of these things are things you need to look into. And then finally on this page would be submission and fees. Most schools will have a portal where they ask you to, fill a form, submit your documents, upload all of these things. Be mindful of the portal requirements. Some people have file type requirements where they say, oh, only submit JPG or PDF files, those submit PNG or things like that. Some will tell you we don't take PDF, we only take documents, Word documents, and things like that. So be mindful of the deadlines, be mindful of the requirements, be mindful of the fees. I know that in Nigeria, for example, they just started allowing international payments with Nigerian cards again. At some point that was not the case. You'd have to maybe tell someone to help you and all those kind of things. So know what the needs are and how you can meet them way ahead of the deadline. Don't wait 2 days or one day to the deadline and then say, oh my God, how will I pay? How will I pay? There's no way to pay. I need to convert. And then you start running helter skelter for something that you should have been able to, resolve early on. So, for like I mentioned, you need to have like a well in advance kind of plan, right? Before you even think of resumption. Planning is key to a successful application, and this is more or less just like a framework or a timeline that can help you to effectively manage your tasks. So the first 2 months, you should be able to define your goals, academic and career goals. Like, what are some 10 to 12 programs or schools that you want to, or you think are suitable and match your goals, and then map out all of these and their requirements. So don't just pick any school randomly. You need to find out, okay, these schools that I'm going to pick, do I like the program? Is the reputation of the school good? Right? Some people are more interested in Ivy League schools than others. I mean, everyone has their preference, right? And then some people are, very particular about the states and the environment that they go to. Some people would tell you, oh, I would prefer to be in XYZ state compared to ABC just because there are more African foods. And some will tell you, oh, I don't like cold weather. So these are some things that, although they might be minor, you can also use them to shortlist, where you would like to be, because there's so many schools that offer the program that you're interested in. So you need to have valid reasons to say, okay, if I'm going to pick A over B, what would be the reason why? Right? It could also be availability of funds and all those kind of things, but you need to shortlist. And I think that's the hardest part for so many people because they're like, oh, I Googled schools with master's degree in sustainability. I came up with a list of 500 schools or 50 schools. How do I choose, right? So you choose based on your interest, your goals, and even just the things that you like generally. Also, for the next or 2 months after that, or even at the same time, depending on how quickly you're able to, shortlist all the schools, it does take a while to think about it and to decide for one over the other. But then you need to start making requests, drafting your CV, your statement of purpose, asking people to look at it, request your transcripts if necessary at that point. Like if you don't already have them, then speak to your recommenders, let them know, oh, I'm trying to apply to this and that, please can you write a recommendation letter for me. Now I feel like it's rude somehow if you've never spoken to this person since you graduated, maybe like 5 years ago or 3 years ago, and all of a sudden you just send them an email, right? And say, oh, give me a recommendation letter. They might even ignore you. So it's important to keep the connections that you have, keep them flowing, even if it means just saying hello once in a while, so that by the time you go and ask for that recommendation letter, they won't ignore your email, and then you call them, go to visit them, and they don't open the door for you or things like that. So no one likes to feel used. So ensure that your recommenders are people that, like I mentioned before, they see you in a good light, they think highly of you, and you have like an ongoing relationship with them. Ongoing relationship doesn't mean you need to call them every day, but at least let them be people that you reach out to. So you'd also need to contact potential advisors, potential mentors in the school that you want to apply to. So research on their profiles. A lot of the university websites will have even the CV of the faculty. They would have information on where this person went to school, what classes they teach, what their research interests are. So do your research, make sure that your work matches and it fits, because the only way someone can support you in your career or academic goal is if they're already working in the line that you would like to follow or that you would like them to guide you on, right? So get feedback from them also. When you send an email, when you reach out to these advisors, don't just say, I want to apply to your school, give me funding, goodbye. No, you need to more or less present yourself from a value perspective. This is who I am. This is what I've done before. This is what I'm capable of doing. And this is how I can also benefit your research group, right? I see that you have worked in XYZ projects, and these are some things that I've worked on before. This is how we would work together and be a good fit for each other. And sometimes even that alone is good enough to get a response to say, okay, you know, here's who I would like you to work with. Here's how I would like you to work with. And some people will say, oh, I don't have space in my lab, but I know XYZ professor that is willing to take you on. Another thing that I've seen is one student contacting 5 professors in the same school doing completely different research. Mind you, these professors talk to each other, right? They're not strangers. They're colleagues. Some of them are even friends outside of work. So imagine if you say, oh, I'm interested in business, but you also send an email to a professor in health. You send an email to a professor whose research is engineering. Which one are you trying to do? Or you send emails to professors in the same department, but they all have completely different research fields that don't even have any relationship with each other. So it's important for you to be mindful of that. Don't be desperate in your application. You can be enthusiastic, you can be encouraged, be motivated and all of that, but don't be desperate to the point where you start taking steps where people question if you really know what you're doing, right? So reach out to the advisors, send an email, attach your CV, maybe even a link to your research profile, and let them see that you're someone who brings value to the team, right? And who also has a mindset to learn. Afterwards, you also need to take your English test. I mean, like I said, you can prepare for your test depending on how long ago you left school, how quickly you learn, your learning patterns and all of those things. There's so many free textbooks and resources outside, on the internet rather, that would help you prepare for these exams. So it's important for you to plan well ahead of time. And then if you know that a strong score would benefit your application, then you need to also prepare very well, in the sense that, is your GPA a good GPA? Do you have GPA of 3/4? 3 points over 4 points, or you have a 4 point and you're like, okay, GPA is good. A GRE is going to help me present myself even better, right? So you need to think about all of these things, know yourself as you are, and then decide on what you need to do to boost your profile. So if you submit all, I've seen people that they submit good CV, they have all the relevant work experience, they have research experience, but their scores, their GPA were just not good enough. So it's like, okay, even though we really like this person, the department says that we can only take people with XYZ scores. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and then, go and present yourself poorly when you have the chance to, submit a strong application. So prepare adequately. If you need help, if you need someone to study with you, you can find someone that's also about to take the exam, and you can study together. Put strategies in place. There's so many YouTube resources, so many things that you can use even as study guides. Take that time apart from social media, sit in your room or wherever it is, go to the library, concentrate, focus, and study, because eventually you're going to get the reward of putting in the time. There was something else I wanted to say. I don't remember. Okay. But yeah, after your tests are ready, you've spoken to an advisor that say, oh yeah, you can apply, you have your drafts and your CVs, and they've been reviewed by everybody you know and trust, and you have recommendation letters, or you have people that said they'll write recommendations for you. And then now you need to think about submitting your application. So this is where, you need to think about prioritizing the deadlines. Also, for international students, there are priority deadlines, typically December to January. Some schools start taking applications from, I think, like September or so, if you want to resume as of August. So they do this typically so that you can prepare for your visa interviews and all of that, because those things also take time. So know the deadlines, know when you plan to resume, submit your documents in time. Some schools will tell you by January they're no longer collecting any documents. Some will tell you by December 15 or December 1st, the applications will close. So, look at all of these. And I remember what I wanted to say before, some schools are more competitive than others. Just by searching a school's name on Google, you can find out what their admission rates are, in terms like, maybe their intake is 85%, for example, meaning that for every 100 people that apply, they admit 85. Some people, or rather in some schools, they only take 5% of people that apply, right? And all those numbers are also varying, because some schools receive more applications than the other, but depending on how competitive the school is. So if, for example, you have a GPA that is not good, your GRE is not great, your TOEFL is barely making it, don't go and apply to a school where you know that they want the best of the best of the best of the best, and they probably only review or admit 1% of the people that applied. You're just shooting yourself in the foot. You're wasting effort, wasting money, wasting time. So look at schools that fit your profile. I mean, I see some people will tell you, oh, you can apply to XYZ school with an ND, with an HND, or with a 2 point GPA, whatever the case is. Know what is suitable for your profile, and then present yourself in the best form. So even if you didn't do so well in school, you can still strengthen your application by, taking I mean, by making good progress, or having good scores on your English proficiency exams and on your GRE. So afterwards, after submitting your application process, I'm going back to number 5 now. After submitting your documents and everything, there's usually a review period, and then they get back to you and say, oh, we want to talk to you. In some cases, you speak to maybe 4 or 5 people in the department. It could also be someone from the program leadership that will say, oh, we want to hear how, your work has matched with your desires and how it will fit into the program that you're applying for and all of those things. So it's also important for you to gather necessary materials for funding applications, in the sense that some schools would need you to to apply separately for some funding opportunities that they have. In some cases, it comes with like an assistantship that it's automatic. When you get your offer, because you've spoken to an advisor, you get an assistantship. And I think this is why it's also important for you to speak to an advisor, because you can always apply to the school without speaking to anybody. And yes, they'll give you admission, but you have to pay out of pocket, right? So these are some things you need to consider if you want an assistantship, especially if you're doing research, right? Then it's advisable to speak to that advisor. And even when you're submitting your application documents, you can mention in your statement of purpose that you've been in contact with advisor XYZ and you would like to work with them, right? Some schools automatically ask you on the form, name 2 professors whose research you are interested in, right? So different schools have different templates, but it's helpful to think of these things because they are very, 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 very vital for you to get funding. Funding is becoming more competitive than it ever was because of limited availability. So there are different types of funding, which I'll talk about in another slide, but you also need to accept the offer. And once you have all of this initial, admission and your offer, um, set in place, then you need to start thinking of, oh, your service application, um, your I-20 from the school. Then you would now go ahead with your visa application process and say, oh, well, this is who is funding me. Because most times they'll ask you, what is your funding source for this program? And if you tell the visa officer that, oh, I'm paying 100% out of pocket, then you need to say, okay, this is what I do, or this is what my parents do that they're able to afford to send me to school. So, for example, if your parent is a teacher in Nigeria and maybe they only teach in a primary school, they don't even own the school, and then you say, oh, my parents are paying for my education, and your tuition for 1 year is $50,000, it begs the question of, can they really afford it, right? So the visa officer you're talking to knows the schools, he knows the situation in your country, and he or she also knows the situation in the country that you're going to. So you want to make sure that your story makes sense, right? So think about these things well ahead of time. If you need funding, if you need scholarships, those are things that you need to, start thinking about and asking. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you're not clear about a particular subject or a particular question. Send an email to the admission board, send an email to the department and ask your questions. They're always, always very helpful, always willing to point you in the right direction for the resources that you need. And one thing I found is that the schools also have a very, very robust website for everything you need. You just need to know how to look. Okay, so like I said again, I feel like I've said a couple of these things, but it's also important to think of fit before prestige. So when you're choosing a school, think about it. Do I fit well into this program, into this school? Will I be able to work well with this advisor before you think about if the school is one of the best in the world, right? So identify a program with faculty members that are actively publishing in the research that you're interested in. What are, their interests? How does it match with your own? So like I said before, don't email a professor in construction and then go and email another professor in machine or electrical engineering. You see that there is a disconnect in that kind of approach, right? So if you're even speaking to multiple professors, or if you'd like to speak to more than one professor in the same faculty or in the same department. Make sure that their work ties together is somewhat similar and it matches your own research interests. It's very important because you don't want to spend the next 3, 4, 5 years of your life working on something that you don't like, you hate. It will become frustrating and the workload is a lot. So you want to ensure that whatever research you do is in a field that you're interested in. Also, think about resources that are available. Ask the professor once they reply your first email, your follow-up email, even after talking to them, depending on what they say, don't be shy to ask, is there funding for international students in this lab? Some people have funding, but it does not work for international students, right? So talk about the grants, talk about the success rates of the graduates. You can even ask, oh, would you be kind enough to let me know what some of the previous people that have worked in the lab, what kind of jobs are they doing now? Because I want to know if, I'll be working on research that would help me get closer to my goals, right? So don't be afraid to ask. Be kind and be polite in your asking. Don't ask a question where the person you're speaking to will say, this is a rude student. Don't craft your messages in ways that will present you in the wrong light. Also ask about the number of students that they have. You can also ask about, the preferred mentoring style for the faculty member. Look at the lab websites. What are some recent publications that this person has, put out or their students have put out? You can use Google Scholar, just type up the person's name and you see all of that information. I like Google search a lot because I can type my questions in the weirdest way and I would get a feedback, right? So most people don't use Google well enough. They prefer to go and ask some, or just keep quiet and be suffering in silence. Use Google even if you're shy to ask a human being, right? But eventually you should still be able to communicate your questions to the professor that you're going to be working with. And you can also contact people who work with that professor, even just by LinkedIn posts and see, oh, okay, this person posted XYZ student. So let me ask the student, what do you think about working with this person? Obviously, they won't tell you anything bad, but you can coin your questions in a way that you get the answers that you're looking for. I was looking through the chats because I see messages coming up. But yeah, so the last thing on this slide would be infrastructure and support, right? Make sure that there's necessary facilities in the sense that you can, I mean, I don't know about many other schools, but for a lot of schools, they tell you these are the facilities that we have to do XYZ research. This is the person whose lab is hosting this particular machinery, right? And then make sure that they have strong international student support services. They have an international student website. They tell you this is where you can get resource for this and that, blah, blah, blah. So these are things that you should look at in a school before saying this is where I want to go to. So speaking about the documents more and more in depth, I feel like I've spoken about these things, but let's touch them again, right? Your application documents are your voice. Make sure that they shine with clarity, precision, and again, compelling storytelling. Tell a story. It's very important that when you're reading your own essay, you enjoy reading it. You read some documents and you're like, I'm just tired. This person, say what you want to say and then move on, right? But you want to make sure that when you're reading your story, you are enjoying it. And so for your statement of purpose, like I said, it should be 1 to 2 page narrative. Don't write a lot, a lot, a lot. Nobody's going to read that. They have what, 50, 500 other applications to look through, right? So they're not going to spend all of their time reading your 10-page narrative. Hook your reader, as it says. Explain your motivation. Talk about your preparation, how you prepared for the program. If you have research experience, showcase that research experience. Also, be sure to mention how your research fits with the faculty member. So if you've not spoken to any faculty member and you're like, oh, I'm just winging it, which I wouldn't advise you to do. But if you've spoken to some people specifically and they say, okay, go ahead and apply, then you can list their name in your statement of purpose. If there's more than one person whose work fits with your work, you can also list it depending on the scenario, right? And like I said, also mention what is the application of your work, of your research, even to the society at large, um, in the future. So, what do you want to use your degree for? Don't just say, oh, I'm coming to your school. I know that you guys have resources. This is what I've done. Help me to help you so that I can be here. Goodbye. No, you want to also say that this is the impact of my work. This is how I know it will benefit um my community. It will benefit either the US or benefit wherever. For your academic CV, highlight your education, your research experience. Also, it's important to mention, have you used tools? Have you used methods, expertise, things that required you to take a training? Your publications, presentation, awards, leadership roles, volunteer roles. These are things that you can list in your two-page CV. If you need to reduce the font size to 10.5, go ahead and do that. If you need to reduce your margin to 0.5 across up, down, left, and right, do that. Nobody's going to look at your excess two-page resume in detail, right? So you want to be able to make sure that whatever it is you're presenting to them is clear and it is brief enough. If they have further questions, they can ask you in the interview, but you also want to present enough information that sells you in the best light. Also, don't leave your recommenders with what's it called now, with no idea or no concept of what to do. Give them notice ahead of time. Don't send recommendation requests maybe like 2 days to the close of application, right? Sometimes they would write the applications, review it over and over again. And all of these people most times are also quite busy in their own personal lives. So you want to give them enough time to be able to work on your recommendation letters, provide them with bullet points. Sometimes you might need to say, oh, even though you know that this is XYZ that I've done, but here are additional insights about me or information about me that can help you write a better letter. For your proposal or writing sample, you if you are applying for a PhD program where they want you to write a proposal, then make sure there's a clear question, your justification method and resources. And so it typically should also be hinged on your previous research experience. So don't just write an abstract research question and say, I was working on metals before and all of a sudden I don't want to work on metals, I now want to work on childcare. It does not make sense, right? So make sure that there's a relationship with what you've done before, what you plan to do. It doesn't have to be 100% linked together, but it's like, for example, a doctor is not suddenly going to wake up and say they are no longer a doctor, they're a mechanic. It doesn't make sense, right? Each line requires extensive years of training to become experts. So if you've been working as a doctor for 5, 6 years, if you're going to become a mechanic, you need to go to apprenticeship. You won't be applying to chief mechanic in an automotive company, right? So these are things you need to think about. If you've been working on a specific line of research, you can say, okay, yeah, maybe I've been a doctor that works with children. I'm a pediatrician. Now I don't want to just do pediatrician work alone. I want to do pediatrician maternity or something like that, right? I'm not a doctor, so I don't know too much about that. But I'm sure you get the example I'm trying to paint. So also for others, you can if you're not doing a PhD, but they also ask you to prepare a writing sample, then you can write something that demonstrates how you think analytically and how you can clearly communicate the thoughts that you have. So Emailing professors, like I said, is also very important. When you're making the first connection, you want to write a well-crafted email to a potential advisor, because that can be the key to many things for you. Be concise, be specific in your email, and be professional. So the subject line should be very, very precise. When they see your email, they should not be wondering, who is this? Where is it from? Why is he here? Right? Prospective PhD applicant for 2026, your name. Simple. Or you can even add XYZ research, right? And then when you're writing the body, think of it that these people reading your emails are also very busy. So you want to keep it to a few lines, go straight to the point, introduce yourself. What is your research focus? Why their group is interesting to you? Maybe one of their paper that you've read that you really like, and how you can contribute to their group. All of these things can be done in 5 to 7 lines. You don't need to write an epistle. Nobody's going to read it, right? Also, attach your CV, like I mentioned. Attach a research sketch, either of things you've done before, things you plan to do, your research. You can even add a link to your research, what's it called now? Your research profile. But again, think of it that people are going to be skeptical about clicking links in an email. So if you can say, look for me I'm on ResearchGate at XYZ, you write your name there instead of including a link, because nobody's going to click a link from a stranger. What if it's a scam, right? So you can include links to preprints, maybe like to a journal. You can write the DOI instead in the documents, right? Or if you have an online portfolio or website, you can attach that. Like I said, don't just write anything so arbitrary that they would be thinking maybe this person is a scammer or something that's trying to send phishing emails to me. So also ask specific questions. Are you recruiting? Is there funding in your group? Do you think that my proposed methods and research would align with your own research, right? Remember to follow up. If you send an email and you don't receive a reply after 10 days, follow up. If you still don't receive a reply after following up once or twice, move on to another person, right? Some of these people that you would email, their email boxes might automatically filter everything and put it in um what's it called now, in junk, let's just say it that way. So if they're not seeing your emails, then move on to another person. You never can tell. They might contact you even after 2 or 3 weeks and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I missed your email, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the case is, make sure that you have, one or two options within the same department. I know typically there are more than one professor that does a particular research area. So in terms of funding, think about funding. It's very crucial. And to be honest, things have changed compared to how they were before, right? The current landscape is different. So you need to diversify your approach. Primarily, a lot of people that come to the US think of research assistantships and teaching assistantships. Those are still the main sources of funding. So it's important for you to start talking with faculty early. Some of these faculty have like 3, 4 people talking to them. So it could also be a case of first come, first serve. So you don't want your request to be maybe 2 weeks to application deadline and you're just asking, do you have money? They probably gave it to somebody else a year ago. So also there are a lot of budget constraints recently, in the sense that a lot of federal research grants have been cut, and so there is more competition, budgets are tight. Some people have even paused their research and are exploring other options. So ensure that you are thinking about other options, backup plans. Do you need to take a loan? I personally don't like loans, just because I don't like to borrow money. But for some people, they take loans, they think of how they're going to pay back, they think of getting cosigners either in the US or in Nigeria or wherever country you're from, right? Another thing that is very, very underexplored are external fellowships and external funding offers. Some bodies would tell you that, oh, we just need to see that you've been admitted to this program. and will give you the money that you want for your first year. Some would ask you to say to apply the first time and apply again, but they will still give you the funding. Some will give you $500, some will give you $1,000. Every single contribution counts to making your life easier. Because imagine if you're in school and you don't have to think about, oh, where is my next food going to come from? Where is my next funding or award going to come from? And you already have this locked down. It means that you can focus more on your work, right? And so external fellowships are very, very underexplored. There's so many bodies, so many organizations that are willing to help students. They have different conditions. So some will tell you you need to already be in school. So those are the kind of applications you think of and you're like, okay, I'll apply in my first semester or apply in my second semester towards my second year. So it helps to, like I said, do a Google search, external funding or scholarships for boys and girls education, or funding or scholarships for students, master students in sustainability, or funding for students in XYZ school, funding for students from XYZ country. There's so many categories and requirements or classifications that these organizations use to group their scholarships. Some will tell you, oh, we're giving funding to women. Some will tell you we're giving funding to people that have single parents. Some will tell you we're giving funding to people that, have certain disabilities or abilities. Some will tell you we're giving funding to people that are writers. Some are giving travel grants. So by searching, you find and you can apply. If you don't search, you cannot find, you cannot apply. So even if you have an assistantship, there's no rule that says, oh, people with assistantship should not apply for scholarships. Even within the school that you would eventually attend, there are still like internal scholarships that you can also apply for. So if you keep looking, you keep finding, keep applying, and just for every application that you submit, remember to always tell a story, a cohesive story, a comprehensive story. Remember to win the heart of your reader by writing something enjoyable, right? And every of your experience counts, to be honest. Don't leave out something and say, oh, this was not useful because it was something I did in church. No, it could be the single thing that you did in church that would be very, very helpful for you getting that award. So, like I mentioned earlier, diversify your plan. There are fellowships in school rather, there are research assistantships, there are external fellowships, there are small grants. Don't ignore a grant because it's $500 or $1,000. It saves you a lot of stress if you have that extra money. Also a couple of things to just be informed of. Visa interview rules are changing, and I think right now they're paying more attention to, even your social media profile and your activity. So if you want to come to the US, don't do anything that is anti-US government, right? Don't say bad things about the place you want to be in, or say I'm for this person against this person. You have no business with all of that, right? Focus on your focus. So also plan that you would attend an in-person interview in the country that you're from. So I know previously you could go to a different country and apply from there, but I think all of those things have been cancelled now. Also, fees are changing. Like I said, beyond the visa fees, there's also the service fee that you need to pay. And I think that can only be paid in the US and it's about $350 or so. There's also a possible visa integrity fee that I think is currently being implemented or is about to be implemented. So make sure you're looking at the requirements on the website for the US government and even for the embassy in your country to say, okay, what are some of these changes? How can I prepare adequately for them? Because if you're going to be paying extra money, you also need to be aware of it, a little bit more um, before deadlines and all of those kind of things. Also thinking towards, after your program and more or less after your degree in the US, rules for OPT, which is basically like an internship, are also changing. So those are some things you also need to start monitoring and thinking about. Also, like I mentioned, it's very, very important for you to take action early. What are some steps you need to do for your visa? Start all of those quickly. Look at the requirements. What's your DS 160 requirement? You need to complete it. Make sure you have proof for all your funding. If you're going to submit bank statements from your parents or by yourself, make sure that you have, like, I think the last 3 months before your interview, you should have all of those in place to avoid delay. Make sure you have like service record updated, you pay all of those fees, and yeah, that's it. So speaking again about your testing and your credentials, again, make sure that you present your best profile. Your standardized tests are also very important, and it's important for you to also prepare your credentials. So I've talked a little bit about this. Meet the required minimum scores for your program. So I know that the GRE has like what, maybe 5 years validity after you take it. The English test, a lot of them are valid for 2 or 3 years before they expire. So if you take a test and you're like, oh, I don't meet the requirements for any of my school, it means you need to take it again, meaning you have to pay again and all of that. Also, the GRE exam is shorter than it has been before. I think when I took it, it was like 4 hours, but now it's about 2 hours. So you can submit your scores to the schools. Also, I know that you can send your GRE scores directly to a school. So it means before taking your GRE, you should also know some of the schools that you're applying to, because they have like a code that you submit and things like that, right? Um, for your credential evaluations, like I mentioned, know what is required for your school. If the school says we need you to do a WES evaluation, which is, I don't remember what WES stands for, but that's what it's called. Um, you would either be required to convert your 5 point GPA to a 4 point GPA, know all of these things ahead of time. And the reason why I'm mentioning these things over and over again is because missing these key steps, even in your application, can cost you a whole year. Right. So you want to make sure that you're consistent, even with the way you save your files, your name, across all your documents. Make sure that there's clarity. So one thing I have as like a practice or a habit is when I'm saving my file that I'm going to upload, I use my first name and my last name. Like I do, maybe for example, transcript underscore Eunice Babatunde, right? Sometimes I use my initials, but that way it helps that even if anything is lost or if they're looking for something in a file, they can find it by your name and they can find it quickly. Um, so what are the main things that you need to do in the next 90 days as a checklist, right? If you're planning to resume school, maybe in August next year, I want you to think about all of these things and focus on them. First thing is to start looking for the five, I think 10 to 12 is a lot, but 5 schools at least that you would like to apply to. You don't need to apply to all of them. I mean, depending on your profile, depending on maybe even if you've spoken to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, sure, everything is set. But the advice is typically about 5 schools, because if you're going to pay application fee for these schools, then you need to also think about the financial and the cost implications. Also to mention, a number of schools would give you a fee waiver. Some of them don't give fee waivers anymore because, the pandemic has quote and unquote phased out. So they're not necessarily providing some of those assistances for students. But some schools still, maintain that standard and say, okay, we can waive your fees. You can also waive your English test if the school requires it, you can tell them all of my degree so far is in English. Write them a very compelling essay with the biggest grammar you have. And then I'm sure they'll be able to, provide an English test waiver. Some schools will say, oh, if you come from XYZ country, you don't need to take an English test. So it differs from school to school, and you need to know what the requirements are. So first thing would be to shortlist not just the school but the program, and then what are the deadlines for applications, what is the associated cost with submitting an application to this school. So if you're going to submit a transcript, official transcript from your school, for example, if for example it costs maybe $10 your school to send the transcript. Imagine if you're submitting to 10 places. That means you're spending $100 on transcript only. So these are some things that you need to think about. If you're going to take English exams or GRE, you also need to think about the cost of that. A lot of these things are not necessarily cheap, right? So you need to think of the associated costs. Start drafting your statement of purpose and your CV. Draft one, draft two, draft three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, right? Tailor them to each program or each school. Like I said, if the requirements are different, obviously the document you're submitting wouldn't be the same. It's the same thing as applying for a job. They tell you to prepare a different resume for a different position or a different company. Also, reach out to your recommenders, greet them well enough, tell them these are the things that you require because you're applying to a school. These are things they can look out for. um Remind them about who you are, what you've done, and all those kind of things. Email different professors. Now 3 to 5 potential advisor is, based on the school. So don't email 5 people in the same school. I think that's a very dirty habit for whatever the case might be. But you know, minimum one or maximum two professors within the same school. But again, remember that it should match your research interest. Um, Also take your test, make sure that you are studying well enough. Don't waste your money by taking the same test 4 times because you just didn't study well enough, right? For your funding blueprint, also start looking at external scholarships. At least think about scholarships that you can apply to before the program starts, at the beginning of program, and even while you're well into the program, right? Because all of these things will be useful for you, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you spend money because you pay for accommodation. Rent is monthly in the US. You pay utilities, water, light, and all of those things every month. There's feeding every month. There are textbooks to buy. You buy clothes. Different seasons have different clothing requirements. You can't wear sweater in the summer, and you can't wear tank tops in the winter. So you need to buy clothes. You need to buy shoes. You need to do all of these things, and money is what you require for them. So it's important for you to think holistically when you're thinking about funding. Look at different sources. And then finally, also prepare your documents for your visa application, right? If you need to go and renew your passport, renew it. Don't take a passport that is going to expire in 2 months and go and apply for a visa. You most likely get denied, or they'll tell you we're sorry, we can't do this. And if you're from where I'm from, you know that applying for a passport could take as much as 3 4 months even before it's ready. So have all of these documents in place. And I think that's the end of my slide. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much. Can we just put our hands together for Madam Eunice for speaking for the last 1 hour, 19 minutes without drinking water. Eunice, do you want to grab a cup of water? I think your mic is muted.
I have water, I just haven't drunk it.
You can take a 10 seconds water break while I read out the questions to you. So we're going to rapidly take questions in the next 10 minutes. So what we're going to do is there are a couple of questions in the chat, and there also we could allow two persons speak very specific and direct questions to us. I see there is already a hand raised. So I'm going to call Jarumi. afterwards. So let me quickly read the first question they called Jeremy. The first question here states, the person is saying, I think I've answered a couple of them. Let me ask this one. This person says, if the school doesn't require GRE, would there be need to submit GRE? Eunice, over to you.
So, if the school doesn't require GRE and they say GRE is optional, I would suggest, if you don't have a strong profile, submit your GRE results. If you already have GRE results, because you need to take one exam and you can use that for 20 schools, 100 schools if you are applying to that many schools. So if you have a GRE exam, submit it. Whether they need it, they don't need it is up to them, right? Some schools don't even mention GRE on their website because they don't require it at all. So if they mention it and say quote and unquote optional, then submit what you already have if you have a GRE result. How else can I answer that question?
I think
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yes, you've answered it. So just in case you did not get what Eunice said, if a school states GRE is not required on their website or on the whatever, and then they go ahead to say, I think there are schools like Boston, PH, etc., SPH, or Brown, SPH, that say GRE not required, scores will not be reviewed if submitted. That one, do not submit, right? Others could say, Eunice said, GRE not required but optional. In that case, you can submit it if you have it, right? If you think it will strengthen your application because maybe your undergraduate GPA is kind of weak, right? And then if you're applying to quantitative tracks like epidemiology, health data science, or you want to stand out in a school like John Hopkins, Columbia MPH, blah, 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 it could help strengthen your application. So that's for that. Next question is, this person says, what are the chances to get a fully funded MPH scholarship in the US, seeing that most schools use the SOFA system and the application fees through this system is high? Yes, it's high. People actually invest into applying to like 5 schools. Each school is taking 150 USD, 250 USD, etc. And what would your advice be between going for an MPH, MSc, public health degree? Is there really a difference? Eunice, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer it?
I think MPH is master in public health.
Yes.
What's the difference between master public health, master of science public health? I don't know. But what I would say is sometimes different schools have slightly different names for their programs, but they're teaching the same thing. And again, it depends on your goal and what you're aiming for. If, for example, you want to work at a company and the company specifically states, we want you to have MPH, then if you're going to do APH, even though I know there's not like APH, that's supposed to be a joke. You know that, okay, your APH might not help you get closer to your goal of MPH, number one. Number two, most of the schools would show you their degree outline in the sense that for XYZ degree, these are the classes that we're going to be teaching. This is the course requirement. This is the credit hour that you would be required to take. These are your electives that you can choose from. So if you look at that list and you don't see anything that is getting you closer to where you want to be, or you don't find courses that are relevant to, helping you get closer to your goal or your specialization, then you can look at other schools, right? So, but is there a difference between MPH and MSc public health? I can't tell you that I know the answer.
Okay, thank you. So I would jump in there and add to what Eunice has answered. First is that when it comes to MPH and MSc, right? MPH are more practicum focused for like a US-based school, because I work in public health, so I technically know that. For example, John Hopkins, for instance, have like very strong public health practicum focus for their MPH programs, right? However, the MSc comes with such a research component that the MPH does not have, right? So MPH gives you like general foundational background into basic epidemiology. It gives you some other just a broad overview, right? And then ideally, sometimes you can find that the MSc has some more research curriculum and some more research methods within them. So usually, I think the difference lies in the curriculum offered by both schools. But while the MPH is classified as a professional degree, an MSc-PH or an MS-PH, right, is classified as an academic degree that can also be used to work in a professional space. So there is technically no practical difference. It is just the certification that the school offers, right? And so that also depends on you. So if you want to think about working in shaping interventions and programs, you should go for MPH in the US. If you want to think about maybe analyzing data and research and to influence policy, you should go for an MSc because of the skill sets that you will build. If you want to think about the funding chances, you should be thinking Texas A&M, you should be thinking Brown University or Boston University, Emory University, etc. They have different funding packages. In terms of the SOFAS thing, they don't joke with the application fee. Literally, you can pay an application fee of 150, 150, 150 for 5 different schools and still end up not getting the admission for these schools, or get admission for these schools and not get funding. If you get admission for these schools and not get funding, that's 150 USD times, what's it called? Times 4. You're gone. How much is that? You need to think properly, right, before you jump into that boat. So while the chances may be slim to get funding, you need to check if the school has funding available for scholarships, right? So that's what you should do to respond to that question. So there are other questions here.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that some
Yeah.
schools would also give you application fee waivers.
Mhm.
So you can send an email to the admission person or the graduate college or the department you're applying to and ask them, okay, are there application fee waivers available? What are the requirements, for these waivers to be assessed? So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Eunice, there's a question that says with a 2.2 and a strong GRE 324, right? What's the total for GRE again? Is it not 340 or 360? I've forgotten. What do you remember, Eunice?
I think it's 340 because it's like what is it 340? I
I've
know that the
forgotten.
minimum is 150. No. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the person is saying, can you help out with schools to target? Schools to
Um, I think that's a what's it called now? I don't know the program you're going for.
it's a
I
bit
don't
tricky.
know your work experience. So if you can give more information about your profile, then it's easier to help you say, okay, maybe look here, look there, right? And again, there are many schools that would take your what's it called now? Your application or give you an admission depending on how you position yourself and say this is what I can, offer. It also helps if you talk to a potential advisor and then, that can help because this person say, okay, I want this person on my team because I see how valuable they are. So there are many approaches that you can take. I can't just give out, go to this school. There's no such thing, right? Because I don't know the program you're applying for and all of those things. So
Okay. All right. So there is this question that someone asked. I think this question is from Grace, and I'll call Jarumi. That's the only hand we'll pick because I have 2 more minutes. Grace says, what's the minimum amount for proof of funds that should be in an account? And also, are there still schools in US that waive IELTS? Waive IELTS, waive IELTS.
So, for US schools, I know that the US equivalent for IELTS is the TOEFL.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools would say if you're from XYZ country, for example, my school would tell you that if you're from Nigeria, Ghana, and many other places, they have a list, right? They tell you you don't need a TOEFL requirement, right? Some of these lists have been updated just because someone advocated and said, oh, we speak English in my country. Why would you guys keep asking us for English proficiency results, right? So you need to look at the website. Also, your proof of fund or your funding depends on the